This is Mark Taylor-Canfield, and this is the MTC Report.
It's not one thing. This is a pattern of divisiveness, of a very dark and, in many ways, dangerous vision of our country.
The demonstrators are chanting "Block Trump." This is Mark Taylor-Canfield, and I'm reporting from Pike Street and 10th in Seattle, where people have taken to the street, and there's a confrontation going on here with police after Donald Trump is elected President of the United States.
Welcome to the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield. We offer you independent voices and underreported stories about topics you won't hear anywhere else. Join us as we delve into the deeper issues behind the news stories of the day on the MTC Report.
Don't go anywhere. The MTC Report with Mark Taylor-Canfield continues next.
Hi, welcome to the MTC Report. I'm Mark Taylor-Canfield. I write a blog at Daily Kos. I've written at Huffington Post, and also I'm editor for Democracy Watch News, which you can check out on Facebook and Twitter. We have international feeds on pro-democracy movements around the world. I'm also a guest columnist for the Capitol Hill Times, and I'm a weekly guest on the Jeff Santos Show, broadcasting from Boston across the country. So today I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things. I've got an interview with someone who just returned from Standing Rock there, but in the meantime, I received this letter. This is a letter from the Elections Board, actually, the Department of Elections to be more specific, from King County, Washington. And let me read it to you, okay? R.E. Ballot returned too late. Dear voter, we received your ballot for the November 8, 2016 general election. Unfortunately, your ballot was returned too late to be counted. By law, we can only process ballots that were postmarked on or before Election Day, or returned to a ballot drop-off location by 8 p.m. on Election Day. To ensure your ballot will be counted in future elections, please return your ballot earlier, as it must be postmarked by Election Day, or deposited at any ballot drop-off location prior to the Election Day deadline of 8 p.m. If you have questions, please contact our offices at 206-296-VOTE from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. We are also available by email at elections@kingcounty.gov. Best regards, Julie Wise, Director. So this letter I received this letter from the King County Department of Elections Director, Julie Wise, okay, on December 5th, 2016. Here's the problem, folks. I mailed my ballot before the pickup time on the US mailbox where I deposited it on Election Day, so it should have been marked. It should have been postmarked that day, right? Well, guess what? It wasn't. So that means we have a problem with our mail-in balloting system in Washington State. They also use this system in Oregon. And in general, it's a better idea because it's harder to manipulate, although I suspect that the ballots are actually counted by an optical scanner at some point, which there's some question about their hackability. So here's the deal. If you are in a mail-in balloting state, mail your ballot in a week ahead of time, days ahead of time, whatever you can do to make sure it gets counted. Because my ballot was not counted, even though I did everything that a person should do to make sure that it was in the mailbox before the pickup time on that mailbox, in a local mailbox in downtown Seattle. So it didn't have far to go to the main post office in Seattle, probably maybe a mile. But it was not postmarked on Election Day, so it's not counted. So there you go. All of the ballot measures that I voted on here locally including some campaign finance reform issues and some other very important issues, some tax issues that were brought up by our neocon paid signature gatherer, Tim Eynon, to undermine, the social welfare system. He got one passed, unfortunately. But here's the deal. My vote was not counted. My vote for U.S. president was not counted, okay? And I don't like this idea. So I'm going to call Julie Wise, the director of the elections department in King County, Washington, and find out why. By the way, this is Martin Luther King Jr. County, okay? I just want to make that clear. I live in Seattle, okay? And that's where my ballot was mailed in a U.S. mail box before pickup time, and I tweeted at the time and took a photo of myself depositing that ballot just to make sure that it was on record, that it was mailed on time.
And if you leave me in the morning, I know it'll be just fine. And if you leave me in the morning, just leave that bottle of wine. We can do it any way you want to do it. Leave that wine, yeah, fine. Say, baby, gotta leave me that.
So we have a problem.
Let me say it again. I believe health care is a right of all people. I will fight for a Medicare for all single-payer system. Second of all, right, you want to talk about rationing? You got 29 million people in this country who have no health insurance. How's that for rationing? They can't go to the doctor.
The other issue, of course, is the election, with Jill Stein's efforts to recount the votes. That's run into some snags, but the process still continues. But a lot of people, they don't understand even what the Electoral College is in this country. I mean, very few people know. I was shocked to see Tom Hartman asking on air, does anybody know how this works? Well, look, here's an article in USA Today, okay? The reason that the Constitution calls for this extra layer of electors rather than just providing for the direct election of the president is that most of the nation's founders were actually rather afraid. James Madison worried about what he called factions, which he defined as groups of citizens who have a common interest in some proposal that would either violate the rights of other citizens or would harm the nation as a whole, which Tocqueville, the famous historian, later dubbed as the, quote, tyranny of the majority, which I also believe Walter Lippmann wrote about. James Madison, the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Madison had a solution for this tyranny of the majority. Quote, a republic, by which I mean a government in which the scheme of representation takes place, opens in a different prospect and promises the cure for which we are seeking.
Said I'm gonna love you, baby, 'cause you're a real bad guy.
As Alexander Hamilton writes in the Federalist Papers, the Constitution is designed to ensure, quote, that the office of president will never fall into the lot of any man who is not in an eminent degree endowed with the requisite qualifications, unquote.
Yeah, fine. Say
According to USA Today, the point of the Electoral College is to preserve, quote, the sense of the people, unquote, while at the same time ensuring that a president is chosen, quote, by men most capable of analyzing the qualities adapted to the station and acting under circumstances favorable to deliberation and to a judicious combination of all the reasons and inducements which were proper to govern their choice. In modern practice, the Electoral College has been mostly a formality, except for a couple of recent elections. Most electors are loyal members of the party that have selected them, and in 26 states plus Washington, D.C., electors are bound by laws or party pledges to vote in accord with the popular vote. Although an elector could, in principle, change his or her vote, and a few actually have over the years, but doing this is pretty rare. As the 2000 election reminded us, the Electoral College does make it possible for a candidate to win the popular vote and still not become president, as in 2016. But that is less a product of the Electoral College and more a product of the way states apportion electors. In every state but Maine and Nebraska, electors are awarded on a winner-take-all basis. So if a candidate wins a state by even a narrow margin, he or she wins all of the state's electoral votes. The winner-take-all system is not federally mandated. States are free to allocate their electoral votes as they wish. By the way, this is my comment. The U.S. Constitution is set up so that the states can decide how they want to run their own part of the presidential election, the national elections. So it's been left up to the legislatures in the U.S. Constitution. They've decided basically to allow the two major parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, to run their primaries and, choose the candidates.
The National Popular Vote Bill would guarantee the presidency to the candidate receiving the most popular votes in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. The President of the United States is elected by 538 presidential electors. The Constitution lets each state choose the method of selecting its electors. Today, 48 states use the so-called winner-take-all law that awards all of a state's presidential electors to the candidate who gets the most popular votes inside each separate state. For example, because Obama received 1.5 million votes in Minnesota and Romney got only 1.3 million, all 10 of Minnesota's electoral votes for president were cast by Democratic electors. The result of these state winner-take-all laws is that neither candidate has any reason to campaign in any state where he is safely ahead or hopelessly behind. Thus, the only states that receive any general election campaign events in 2012 were the 12 states that were within 3% of the national outcome. In fact, 2/3 of the general election campaign events took place in just 4 closely divided states. Ohio received 73 of the entire country's 253 campaign events, almost 1/3, and a similarly large portion of the ad spending. Florida got 40 campaign events, Virginia 36, and Iowa 27. 96% of the campaign was concentrated in just 8 states. Meanwhile, 23 reliably Republican states were totally ignored by both parties, as were 15 Democratic states in the District of Columbia. But there's more at stake than whether babies don't get kissed in the 39 flyover states. In his book, Presidential Pork, Dr. John Hudak of the Brookings Institution documents how battleground states receive 7% more presidentially controlled grants, twice as many disaster declarations, and considerably more Superfund and No Child Left Behind exemptions. The Small Business Administration's largest loan in history was to a ricotta cheese factory, described by President Obama as, quote, the tastiest investment the government has ever made, unquote, located in, you guessed it, Ohio. Meanwhile, Professors Douglas Kreiner and Andrew Reeves show how the interests of battleground states shape innumerable government policies, including steel quotas imposed by the free trade president from the Free Trade Party.
The Electoral College was not the only constitutional limitation, though we've discarded most of those limitations. Senators were initially to be appointed by state legislatures, and states were permitted to ban women from voting. Slaves got an even worse deal, as a slave officially was counted as just 3/5 of a person. The 14th Amendment abolished the 3/5 rule and granted male former slaves the right to vote. The 17th Amendment made senators subject to direct election, and the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. So that's where we've been, folks. Now, who is the Electoral College? Well, you can actually find out that information online, and there are people who have gone public as being electors, including, if you see one of my previous reports with Tom Hartman, there was an elector from Washington State who went on his program and discussed what it's like to be an elector and how they're chosen. But this is an issue that hasn't gone away. There are still people saying that the electors should change their votes. So we'll see.
Don't go anywhere. The MTC report with Mark Taylor-Canfield continues next.
Now, here's another thing I really wanted to talk to you about, but most people don't know anything about it. It's called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. So what is that? It's an attempt to get rid of the Electoral College. Yes, that's right. It's an agreement among a group of U.S. states and the District of Columbia to award all their respective electoral votes to whichever presidential candidate wins the overall popular vote in the 50 states and in the D.C. area. The compact is designed to ensure that the candidate who wins the most popular votes is elected president, and it'll come into effect only when it will guarantee that outcome. I know that sounds a little complicated, but as of 2016, it has been adopted by 10 states and the District of Columbia. So together, they have 165 electoral votes amongst those states, which is 30.7% of the total Electoral College and 61.1% of the votes needed to give the compact legal force. So people should know about this, and they should lobby their state representatives to join this National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, better known as the MPVIC, and get rid of the Electoral College. Let's have a direct democratic vote, and let's get the person with the most popular votes elected into office, not the person with the most electoral votes, because it looks really sour to the rest of the world when you have to tell them that your president was elected without the majority of without the most popular votes, you know. So, come on, it's common sense. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And you can find out more about that by looking it up. It's proposed in the form of an interstate compact, and the agreement would go into effect among the participating states in the compact only after they collectively represent an absolute majority of votes, currently at least 270 in the Electoral College. In the next presidential election after adoption by the requisite number of states, the participating states would award all of their electoral votes to presidential electors associated with the candidate who wins the overall popular vote in the 50 states and the District of Columbia. Now, here's a side issue too, but the District of Columbia really should be a state by this point. I don't know why they haven't done that. But as a result, the winner of the national popular vote would always win the presidency by always securing the majority of votes in the Electoral College. Until the compact's conditions are met, however, all states award electoral votes in the current manner. So the compact would modify the way participating states implement Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution, which requires each state legislature to define a method to appoint its electors to vote in the Electoral College. The Constitution does not mandate any particular legislative scheme for selecting electors. Instead, it vests state legislatures with the exclusive power to choose how to allocate its own electors. So that's the MTC report for today. I want to thank everybody for supporting me and watching these videos. We'll continue to produce them and try to give you the real scoop on what's going on, the news behind the news, as they say. So thank you very much. This is Mark Taylor-Canfield, musician and journalist, signing out from Seattle. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Another election, another convention, another media intervention, another reason, another season to vote for Bernie.
It's not one thing. This is a pattern of divisiveness, of a very dark and in many ways dangerous vision of our country, where he incites violence.
This is the MTC Report, the news behind the news, with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield.
I've been criticized saying that, let me say it again, I believe health is a right of all people. I will fight for a Medicare for all single-payer system. Second of all right, you want to talk about rationing? You got 29 million people in this country who have no health insurance. How's that for rationing? They can't go to the doctor.
Now here's a place you always need a lot of friends.
You will finally have a government on your side, fighting for your community and protecting your family. By the way, folks, while we're at it, great.
All right, go. To say, but she told the girl right there, you gotta come home right away. Stuck in New Orleans with a bottle of wine. Now I'm stuck in the Big Easy, and I got one thing done.
Close to having our first ever woman president, and we have a guy that's a white nationalist. A lot of spin
It's a lot of hype, and Hillary's nervous. She answers twice. It's really thrilling that they're so willing to vote for Bernie. Yeah, Bernie Sanders guy. Picture a little love nest, the Democratic Party. On one side it votes for Bernie, but the leaders, they want Hillary. He's doing phone banks, he's taking polls, and every day his campaign grows. And don't forget, folks, that's what you get, folks. We're voting for Bernie, that Bernie Sanders guy. It's one big mess, the party's splitting. And can't you guess, he feels neglected, and she's suspected of sleeping with Wall Street.
This is the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield.
We can have a world-class healthcare system without waiting lines.
Okay, as I said, later we have an interview with someone who just returned from Standing Rock, and we'll get to that interview with Paul soon. But I wanted to also mention something that's very, very important to me, and that is press freedom. And you'll find that I report on this issue quite often, especially now in the United States. But I want to make it clear that some reporters are being arrested at protests, and especially these pipeline protests, and they are being arrested and charged, okay? And I just wanted to be clear, these are punitive measures. These people like Amy Goodman from Democracy Now!, who I've said before is probably the reason that I became a journalist, she was arrested because of her point of view, folks. Let's make that very clear. If nobody else is going to say it, I'm going to say it. She was arrested because the local law enforcement there did not like her point of view, and they accused her of biased reporting, okay? Also, a lot of folks don't know this, but a filmmaker is currently facing 45 years in prison for reporting on the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. Common Dreams reports, in an ominous sign for press freedom, documentary filmmaker and journalist Deia Scholsberg was arrested and charged with felonies carrying a whopping maximum sentence of up to 45 years in prison, simply for reporting on the ongoing indigenous protests against fossil fuel. This article was actually published on October 15th. Scholsberg was arrested in Walhalla, North Dakota for filming activists shutting down a tar sands pipeline, part of a nationwide solidarity action organized on behalf of those battling the Dakota Access Pipeline. The filmmaker was held without access to an attorney for 48 hours. Her colleague Josh Fox wrote in The Nation that her footage was confiscated by police. Scholsberg was then charged with 3 felonies, according to the Huffington Post: conspiracy to theft of property, conspiracy to theft of services, and conspiracy, that's the key word here, conspiracy to tampering with or damaging a public service. Together, the charges carry 45 years in maximum prison sentences. According to Josh Fox, her colleague, quote, "They have, in my view, violated the First Amendment," unquote. "It's frigging scary. They threw the book at Deia for being a journalist." NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden observed that Scholsberg faces more years in prison than he does for leaking secret documents about the NSA's mass surveillance program in 2013. Deia isn't alone, observed Josh Fox in an op-ed in The Nation. The arrest of journalists, filmmakers, and other witnessing and reporting on citizen protests against fossil fuel infrastructure and climate change is part of a worrisome and growing pattern. Indeed, the news of Scholsberg's arrest followed Democracy Now!'s Amy Goodman's announcement earlier this week that she'll return to North Dakota to combat charges she faces as a result of reporting on the Dakota Access Pipeline protests last month. Goodman, whose camera crew filmed a private security team attacking peaceful Native American protesters with dogs and pepper spray, faces charges on criminal trespassing. It also emerged that a North Dakota state prosecutor has dropped the trespassing charge and is seeking instead to charge Goodman with participating in a riot. Well, luckily, those charges for rioting were dropped. But the point here is that Scholsberg was arrested on conspiracy charges, which means that she was there when people were doing something illegal that she was reporting. Okay? So, conspiracy. That means she doesn't have to directly involve herself in the crime, but by being a witness, now she's facing 45 years in prison. This is ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. Journalism is not a crime. It's a responsibility. The actions of the North Dakota Police Force, but a violation of the Constitution. So that's what's going on in the country. Meanwhile, as I reported last MTC report, number 9, the Committee to Protect Journalists says that Donald Trump is a direct threat to freedom of the press in the United States. These are issues that we really, really need to keep our eye on, folks. And we need to support alternative media. We need to support all those people who are trying to tell the truth and are putting themselves on the line in order to report to you. So please go out there, be a proactive media consumer, and find someone who is doing independent work and support them. But another thing I thought was really interesting and rather alarming is what Dan Rather has had to say about the Trump administration. According to the article at Daily Kos, Dan Rather sounds the alarm. Now is a time when none of us can afford to remain seated or silent. Now, he's a guy who's been with CBS News for many years and might be considered a corporate reporter, but he is sounding the alarm, and according to the Daily Kos, we should do well to listen and then take action. This is what he had to say. Now is a time when none of us can afford to remain seated or silent. We must all stand up to be counted. History will demand to know which side you were on. This is not a question of politics or party or even policy. This is a question about the very fundamentals of our beautiful experiment in a pluralistic democracy ruled by law. When I see neo-Nazis raise their hands in terrifying salute in public in our nation's capital, I shudder in horror. When I see that action mildly rebuked by a boilerplate statement from the president-elect, whom these bigots have praised, the anger in me grows. And when I see some in a pliant press turn that mild statement into what they call a denunciation, I cannot hold back any longer. Our Declaration of Independence bequeaths us our cherished foundational principle. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Unquote. Might have been nice if they had mentioned women in that statement. These truths may be self-evident. This is according, Dan rather continues. These truths may be self-evident, but they are not self-replicating. Each generation has to renew these vows. This nation was founded as an opposite pole to the capriciousness of an authoritarian monarch. We set up institutions like a free press and an independent court system to protect our fragile rights. We have survived through bloody spasms of a civil war and a civil rights movement to extend more of these rights to more of our citizens. But the direction of our ship of state has not always been one of progress. We interned Japanese Americans, red-baited during the McCarthy era, and more. I feel the riptide of regression once again swelling under my feet, but I intend to remain standing. Okay, another editorial comment from me. You might want to mention COINTELPRO and the infiltration of peace groups and the harassment of Martin Luther King Jr. by the FBI. But let's go on with what Dan has to say. In normal times of a transition in our presidency between an incoming and outgoing administration of different political parties, there is a certain amount of fretting on one side and gloating on the other. And the press usually takes a stance that the new administration at least deserves to have a chance to get started, a honeymoon period. But these are not normal times. This is not about tax policy, healthcare, or education, even though all of these things and more are so important. This is about racism, bigotry, intimidation, and the specter of corruption. But as I stand, I do not despair, because I believe that the vast majority of Americans stand with me. To all those in Congress of both political parties, to all those in the press, to religious and civic leaders around the country, your voices must be heard. I hope that the president-elect can learn to rise above this and see the dangers that are brewing. If he does and speaks forcibly and with action, we should be ready to welcome his voice. But of course, I am deeply worried that his selection of advisors and cabinet posts suggests otherwise. To all of you, I say, stay vigilant. The great Martin Luther King Jr. knew that even as a minority, there was strength in numbers in fighting tyranny. Holding hands and marching forward, raising your voice above the din of complacency can move mountains. And in this case, I believe there is a vast majority who wants to see this nation continue in tolerance and freedom, but it will require speaking. Engage in your civic government. Flood newsrooms or TV networks with your calls if you feel they're slipping into the normalization of extremism. Donate your time and money to causes that will fight to protect our liberties. We are a great nation. We have survived deep challenges in our past. We can and will do so again. But we cannot be afraid to speak and act to ensure the future we want for our children and our grandchildren. And as Daily Kos says, are you listening, journalists, activists, citizens? The time is now.
Said you don't like my music, says it's scratching you, but I said my songs are baby, then maybe you're the fool. Well, I tried to make you happy, but you just let me down. I tried to do my best for you, but you just slept around. I gave you all my money, but you just wanted some more. I said I love you.
Hi, this is Mark Taylor-Canfield, and this is the MTC Report.
Don't go anywhere. The MTC Report with Mark Taylor-Canfield continues next.
It's not one thing. This is a pattern of divisiveness, of a very dark and in many ways dangerous vision of our country.
The demonstrators are chanting "Block Trump."
Welcome to the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield. We offer you independent voices and underreported stories about topics you won't hear anywhere else. Join us as we delve into the deeper issues behind the news stories of the day on the MTC Report.
Where people have taken to the street and there's a confrontation going on here with police. The President of the United States.
Fighting for your community and protecting your family.
In all honesty, I think that the Standing Rock tribe will do all they can, all in their power, to open their arms up to these people and make sure that they are fed and they are clothed and that they are warm.
Did you hear any talk of people wanting to be violent there? Did you see any weapons being stored or anything like that? Because it seems like the police are always trying to, spin it as if the protesters are violent somehow.
I did not see any indications or hear any talk about anybody using violence against people. There's very much a consensus within the movement and a focus by the tribal elders on making sure that things are peaceful. And the reason for that is that the police are going to do everything in their power to paint a picture that the protesters are violent and that the police use of force, the police use of water cannons, of tear gas, rubber bullets, beanbags, is justified. And the reason the tribal elders focus so much on nonviolence and on maintaining a level of calm, for instance, when people go out on actions, we are actually briefed and one of the big things that's mentioned is you cannot have a pocket knife.
Native veterans, our elders down there, take their voice, listen to their words, their stories. Listen to, they're there in the camp too. It's not just the people in the media as well. We're telling a story, you're seeing it. But there's other people cooking down there. There's people taking care of there's the medics coming in. There's people chopping wood. People pulling people out there getting stuck. There's people helping with tents. There's the setting up of the wireless communication. There's people in solidarity together. They're just helpers going around and taking care of the kitchens. Those are also the people you want to interview, not just what you feel is important, because there's many circles important down here that are down there. Again, you'll see that balance of what's happening in the camp, and a lot of the veterans are sharing their story about how this is where their peace is. They're feeling that peace, and that even though they can see what's happening around the camp, they're still feeling a peace. That's what you want to get. That's what you want to document, is that beauty there. Again, no homelessness, no hunger, free healthcare, education, solidarity, in one of the only places in the world where you have all indigenous people from 4 directions of the continent praying in their own way as we're here in solidarity with the Standing Rock tribe. What's going to happen on December 5th? Well, we're going to see that their threats are continually to get stronger. If you're on the bridge, we can hear them make their comments. They're bold about their comments. They feel we're trespassing. We'll see how that goes. You know, we're going to continue to bring the updates as we go day by day here. Oh, many blessings, City. Thank you. You're welcome, Amy. I agree with you, Erica. There's another video we watched with the LRED when the veterans on the front. The speaker was saying, the guy on the mic was saying, you need to go back to the camp. Although you're trespassing on this bridge, although you're trespassing in the camp, you're not supposed to be camping, we need you to go back to the camp. And this guy was saying over and over and over. So he's making his adjustment to his conversation with the veterans, that you're illegally in the camp, but you're also illegally on the bridge, but you need to go back to the camp. Although it is illegal to be at the camp, you need to get off the bridge. He kept saying this over and over and over. And we're listening to all these videos, we're listening to all this audio. But I encourage you guys to educate yourself about the indigenous issues. Hollywood is here, and you know, we're continually trying to help them with the education it takes at this time to make a wrong right. Because Hollywood has also romanticized the Plains Indians, romanticized indigenous people in media. So the goal here is to educate and empower, and here's a wrong that you can make right. And I'm glad that many of our relatives there, non-native relatives in Hollywood that are here, that are looking for that guidance to share as well and accurately tell the story. That's the main thing here, accurately tell the story. We also have Native professors that are coming in that you also can contact and talk about the story here with the treaty, the tribe, the history, so you're getting from an indigenous perspective. Remember this, ethnohistorians share our story and cite themselves as the original author. It is the indigenous historians, which are our elders in the community that are within the tribe, to tell and share our story. So if you want to know about this tribe, you call the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and talk directly with the tribe. If you want to talk about any other tribe, such as the Paiute tribe, which I'm from, then you would call that tribe, or the Shoshone tribe, or there's the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota, or the Anishinaabe in Canada, or the Six Nations from New York, the Navajo, the Dene from over in Navajo country, the Apache, the Arikawa, the Chickasaw, the Kickapoo, the Choctaw, the Seminoles, the Pawnees, the the Shoshones, the Washos, you directly contact them and get it directly from. You can do this now from the tribe. You can educate yourself directly from the indigenous people. Also, is we all are at a level of different healing. So that comes from the last 500 years. So I apologize ahead of time if someone isn't as patient with you as I am with re-educating you, because we know everything about Americans and non-natives, but you know nothing about us. Do you hear that? You know nothing about us, only what you see in movies and read. But I'm sharing with you from an indigenous perspective, a professor and an educator. Ethno-historians are not our storytellers. Our indigenous people are our storytellers. Our tribes have the story still. There is another side to history, is the indigenous history, that share the stories of why we have historical trauma, why we're fighting for our traditional homelands, our traditional resources, why we're protecting the water, and why we're looking for clean air, why we understand when an environment is in danger, our Mother Earth is in danger from global change of environmental disasters that are happening worldwide, because our mother is cleaning herself slowly. So these are the things that we can share with you that we see, because we are connected directly to the earth through our medicines, through our ceremonies, through our daily walk. And that's what it means to be indigenous. And the other thing here is that when you're coming here, you're in solidarity with the tribe. Remember that. Don't come with your own agenda in place. You're coming here to be in solidarity with the tribe. If you're coming here with a grudge, turn around and go back. Okay? Don't come. If you're coming here to seek revenge or anything like that, turn around and go back. Because after we leave, after we're gone, the children will have to go through what we do, what our decisions are, what our actions are today. They're going to have to grow up, the families, the community will have to endure that around, in the areas around this homelands of the tribe, Standing Rock tribe. Those are the things we need to think about. Also, for you guys that are mystical and coming here as a human, this is a human issue. Yes, it is a human issue, but you're coming to a tribe and their homelands, and we're coming to solidarity first for them. So yes, it is an indigenous, it is an issue, a human issue with the water, but don't come with your own agenda and not try to follow the protocols of the tribe, because you're not home. You're in someone else's homeland, someone else's territory. Educate yourself where you're at. Don't take it upon yourself to start creating your own fires and ceremonial fires and get mystical on us, because we're visitors here. I'm a visitor here. You're a visitor here. And if you want to know more about what's happening, go to the tribe and share that with, listen to them. And where we are at is a very spiritual place. And listen to the stories that they have. And don't try to change them. Don't try to change me. Don't try to change any of us. Solidarity is very, very, something very special. And stay in that. And know that you came as a helper, and that you came to stand in solidarity, and learn what that means, and reconnecting your spirit to Mother Earth. And to say that to you in a good way, take some time to think about that. This isn't Burning Man. This isn't a hippie fest. This isn't all those things. This isn't to come get your Indian name. This isn't down here to learn how to shape shift. These are things that we're down here to educate each other on, that the indigenous people have been here for over 500 years, since time immemorial, and that we're going to do this in the best way we can to help educate. This area that we are on is sacred land, from what we're told from the elders, and we want to share that with you. Let's do it in a good way, and send healing on the other side, that we pray for the Dakota Access Pipeline workers, the spirit to connect with the mercenaries that are on the other side, the Morton County Police Department. We're sending blessings that way, so that their spirit reconnects, and that the truth comes out in their voice, and that their families are watching, their schools are watching, and their community is watching. So you guys know these guys. We are putting it up to you to hold them accountable.
me, but you still wanted more. I said, I love you, honey, you just wanted to the door. You wanted me to stay home and help you with the chores, and I said, baby, I think I'm getting bored. You took my favorite jacket, then you chased my friends away, and now I'm here all alone, and I'm alone, I guess I'll stay. Well, why'd you have to cheat me out of everything I own? You took my record collection and you kicked me.
I'd like to close on this note. Now, many of you have probably heard this before. The 14 Characteristics of Fascism by Lawrence Britt. But I thought this might be an appropriate time to read it. Political science Dr. Lawrence Britt recently wrote an article about fascism. Actually, this was published in 2003. Fascism, anyone? In the magazine Free Inquiry, spring 2003. Dr. Britt was studying the fascist regimes of Hitler in Germany, Mussolini in Italy, Franco in Spain, Suharto in Indonesia, and Pinochet in Chile. Dr. Britt found that they all had 14 elements in common. He calls these the identifying characteristics of fascism. The 14 characteristics are: number 1, powerful and continuing nationalism. Fascist regimes tend to make constant use of patriotic mottos, slogans, symbols, songs, and other paraphernalia. Flags are seen everywhere, as are flag symbols on clothing and in public displays. Number 2, disdain for the recognition of human rights. Because of fear of enemies and the need for security, the people in fascist regimes are persuaded that human rights can be ignored in certain cases because of, quote, need. And the people tend to look the other way or even approve of torture, summary executions, assassinations, long incarcerations of prisoners, etc. Number 3, identification of enemies/scapegoats as a unifying cause. The people are rallied into a unifying patriotic frenzy over the need to eliminate a perceived common threat or foe. Racial, ethnic, or religious minorities, liberals, communists, socialists, terrorists, etc. Number 4, supremacy of the military. Even when these are widespread domestic problems, the military is given a disproportionate amount of government funding, and the domestic agenda is neglected. Soldiers and military service are glamorized. Number 5, rampant sexism. The governments of fascist nations tend to be almost exclusively male-dominated. Under fascist regimes, traditional gender roles are made more rigid. Number 6, sometimes the media is directly controlled by the government, but in other cases the media is indirectly controlled by government regulation or sympathetic media spokespeople and executives. Censorship, especially in wartime, is very common. Number 7, obsession with national security. Fear is used as a motivational tool by the government over the masses. Number 8, religion and government are intertwined. Governments in fascist nations tend to use the most common religion in the nation as a tool to manipulate public opinion. Religious rhetoric and terminology is common from government leaders, even when the major tenets of the religion are diametrically opposed to the government's policies or actions. Number 9, corporate power is protected. The industrial and business aristocracy of a fascist nation often are the ones who put the government leaders into power, creating a mutually beneficial business/government relationship and power elite. Number 10, labor power is suppressed. Because the organizing power of labor is the only real threat to a fascist government, labor unions are either eliminated entirely or are severely suppressed. Number 11, disdain for intellectuals and the arts. Fascist nations tend to promote and tolerate open hostility to higher education and academia. It's not uncommon for professors and other academics to be censored or even arrested. Free expression in the arts is openly attacked, and governments often refuse to fund the arts. Number 12, obsession with crime and punishment. Under fascist regimes, the police are given almost limitless power to enforce laws. The people are often willing to overlook police abuses and even forego civil liberties in the name of patriotism. Number 13, rampant cronyism and corruption. Fascist regimes almost always are governed by groups of friends and associates who appoint each other to government positions, and they use government power and authority to protect their friends from accountability. It's not uncommon in fascist regimes for national resources and even treasures to be appropriated or even outright stolen by government leaders. Number 14, fraudulent elections. Sometimes elections in fascist nations are a complete sham. Other times, elections are manipulated by smear campaigns against or even assassination of opposition candidates, use of legislation to control voting numbers or political district boundaries, and manipulation of the media. Fascist nations also typically use their judiciaries to manipulate or control elections. There's more information that you can get from an article called The Hallmarks of Fascist Regime by Skip Stone. So, potentially very relevant information considering some of the appointments that Donald Trump is making in his cabinet as President-elect of the United States of America.
I try to stay focused on where we need to go, and it's lonely, as you can see, just me, but it's got to get done, and we need to make it done, and it's the only way to articulate what's happening on the outside, what's happening with the FCC, what's happening with the stingrays going on, what's happening with cell blockers with the FCC going on, and what's happening with the violations of the FAA. It's a way to document where the movement is happening. It's documenting the helicopters flying around over tribal airspace. Documentation. You can see the military is more heavily on the pipeline area. This is where we're at, documenting and continually to watch footage and see what's going on in that footage. We're seeing violators in the footage. We're seeing agitators. Another one we're seeing is the agitators are non-native agitators coming in, not saying that they're part of any other group, but they look suspicious when we see them on the other side. We just continue to document the movements. And I guess the camp, you guys want to pick up these guys. There's CNN coming in, there's ABC, NBC, CBS. Go take care of them guys so we can work out here, you know. Go get an interview, relatives. Go over there and explain your story, share your story. I've got enough interviews on me, okay? Enough interviews on me. It's our camp that's important. Our veterans are important. Our native veterans, our elders down there.
Let me say it again. I believe health care is a right of all people. I will fight for a Medicare for all single-payer system. Second of all, right? You want to talk about rationing? You got 29 million people in this country who have no health insurance. How's that for rationing?